All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the July 1st Friday webinar, or I guess in this case, the second Friday webinar. You may have noticed that the webinar topic has changed. Unfortunately, our original presenter was not able to make it today. However, we are very grateful and excited to have Shelly Clark, our Northwest WSCUHO past president from Western Oregon University, joining us today. Her session is titled Student Staff Training, a Regional Review. Before I turn it over to Shelly, I have a few reminders for you. Please feel free to type any questions you have into the chat box. Before you log off, don't forget to fill out the first Friday webinar evaluation, which will be posted below. And if you have a topic that you're passionate about and think would make a great first Friday webinar, we're always looking for applicants. So please feel free to let us know using the same link. Thank you all again for coming, and without further delay, I'll turn it over to Shelly.
All right, well, hello. Good morning, everyone. I hope that your second Friday of July is treating you well and that you are excited to talk a little bit about student staff training and do a little bit of a regional review with that. As Charlene mentioned, we had a change in our topic, and so I hope that this is a invited and welcome change, given that I think that most of us in residential education are really gearing up for our professional staff training and our student staff training and hall opening. We thought that this might be a nice, timely session for us to talk about. And so with that, one of the things that I would be remiss if I didn't mention is that Northwest WSCUHO's, their summer social media campaign that they're doing is all about show us what your training looks like. And so I invite you to tag Northwest WSCUHO or hashtag Northwest WSCUHO on any social media platform to show our region what your training looks like with our staff. And so you could also do the hashtag summer training series or hashtag this is training. I know that we've already gotten some pretty delightful and, dare I say, hilarious photos of individuals surrounded by binders or professional staff photos all together. They've just been delightful. And so I encourage you to engage in that as well. So a little bit about the session that we're going to have today. So this webinar will begin with an overview of student staff training models from the provinces and states within the Northwest WSCUHO region. The webinar will use training examples from Alaska, Alberta, British Columbia, Oregon, and Washington. And the presentation will provide an overview of structures of student staff training, provide some best practices and strategies to create training, which will meet the needs of your department and probably of your institution. And then after the presentation, and it's going to be a briefer presentation, we're then going to move into a virtual roundtable discussion to give anyone who is here the opportunity to share best practices at their institutions, provide strategies, ideas, or even just ask follow-on questions that they may have of some of the programs that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today. All right, so I'd say before we jump into really talking about training, if you are from an institution that may have never had residence halls before, or you may not have needed to really facilitate training, or maybe if you're from an institution that is really like, we need to take a good critical look at what we're offering and how we're offering. Here are a couple of recommended publications that I have for you. So for our friends in the United States, there's a publication that comes out every few years. It's called the CAS Standards, or CAS Professional Standards for Higher Education. And when you look through the book, you're actually going to see all of the different departments or areas within student affairs. And what you're going to find is a list of, here are both recommended programmatic or recommended needs for your department, as well as here are required. Like, these are not just like nice recommendations. This is what you absolutely need to be doing and what you need to be offering. And so I know that when we are developing our training, at Western Oregon University, and I'll reference that I'm from Western Oregon University a few times today. I know that we go back every year and just check our training schedule with what is recommended and what is required through CAS, just to make sure that we are offering exactly what it is that we should be offering, minimally, right? We always want to go above and beyond that, right? Compliance is a floor, it's not a ceiling, and so we want to make sure that we're checking in on that. Another publication that I would always encourage is the WSCUHO Core Competencies, the body of knowledge for campus housing professionals. Again, if you're looking for a guideline of what is it that I should be offering, how should I be offering that, that's a really good starting place. And then two publications that are a little bit dated. I mean, they're a little bit older, but if you don't have them in your library, I would certainly recommend that if you're developing your training program, is both Learning Reconsidered and Learning Reconsidered 2. This is your guide and your justification as to why it is in our best interest to take a curricular approach or an outcomes-based approach for our training and for really any activity that we do within university housing. We should always be considering what is that impact on students and what is that impact on learning. And so those are two publications that I think would serve you well to have that in your library. So the schools represented in the review that we have, so we have Western Oregon University, which is an institution located in Oregon. We have St. Martin's University, which is located in Washington. Washington State University, which is surprisingly located in Washington. We have University of the Fraser Valley, which is located in British Columbia. We have the University of Calgary in Alberta. We have the University of Lethbridge, also in Alberta. We have Mount Royal University in Alberta, as well as the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which again, surprisingly, is located in Alaska. Sometimes it's just right in the name. And for those of you who may not track this information, one of the things that I will share with you is that you may see some parity between the schools that are represented in this review, as well as the schools that are represented on our board of directors. And so as we were putting this together, we wanted to ensure that we were really looking at all of the different state and provinces and looking at best practices. And so we had kind of a built-in focus group for us to make sure that we were covering things. As we organize trainings, and I've had the opportunity to help organize student staff trainings at a number of different institutions, these are some of the phrases that I hear often that are said by our professional staff or even our student staff. So they'll say things like, well, we can't invite in guest speakers because we need to facilitate all of the training sessions. Or similarly, like, do I have to facilitate all of the training sessions? This is a pretty burly week. And so if I can give myself just a little bit of time, that might be well received. There's statements such as, well, doesn't everyone take their student groups on retreats? I mean, don't we all go on overnight trips? They'll ask questions like, why do we have to spend so much time on kind of fill in the blank topic? And that could be any number of topics, but there's always that question of why do we need to do that? There'll be statements like, doesn't everyone split up their training sessions for both a first-year staff and then a returning staff? Doesn't everyone offer kind of those extended skills? They'll ask questions like, why are we not training our staff at, fill in the blank university? And again, this could come from maybe a conference presentation that they have attended, or a passive program or a blog post, or maybe from some of those fantastic social media posts about like, this is what training looks like for us. They'll ask questions like, is it really necessary to approach our training programs with a curriculum or outcomes in mind? We just want it to be fun, right? We just want it to be relaxing, kind of breezy, easy peasy. And then they'll ask questions like, do we really have to train our staff each year? Right? And so So again, hopefully some of these questions are kind of resonating with you, or some of these statements may be resonating with you. Either you have asked these questions or others have asked the questions kind of sitting around the table with you. And so what it is that I did is I asked our executive board, or our board of directors, to send me their training schedules, as well as kind of what goes into that training schedule and why are you wanting to do that. And so having had the opportunity to start to compare 7 different training schedules, here are some of the commonalities that I was able to find within all of those training schedules. And so this might be able to help give you some good starting points, or some good, like, oh, okay, so here's what everyone is kind of experiencing. So some of those commonalities are that student staff training typically lasts between 1 to 2 weeks. And that's not training every single day. That may be a little bit of time off for self-care or refresh. For those universities that had a shorter training period, they typically had a more robust online training program. And for those that went the full 2 weeks, they focused more on that in-person training opportunity. The topics that were most often covered in our student staff training, and again, this isn't true for every single university, but for most universities, were there was a specific session on expectations. There were sessions on policies and conduct within the residence halls. There were sessions on sexual violence and mandatory reporting, or being a responsible employee. Sessions on programming, sessions on team development, sessions on conflict management, crisis management, resources, suicide prevention, community development. There was some online training. There was some diversity and social justice training that happened, as well as some healthy living pieces to it. All of the schools that we reviewed utilized guest presenters. University housing is seen within the student affairs world as a generalist. And so different than, say, academic advising, where you really go deep in your understanding of academic advising. University housing is a generalist because we need to know a lot, or a little, about a lot of different topics. And so when we have some specific presentations, like, so for example, if we have some specific presentations on suicide prevention or sexual violence and mandatory reporting, it serves us well to be able to have experts on that topic be able to come in and give that deep dive presentation from an informed space. And it also helps provide some relief for our presenters and for our staff that are facilitating training, to be able to just say, like, okay, here's a two-hour block where I get the opportunity to just sit and listen. All of the schedules that I received were, kind of, quote, still in draft form, right? And so what that meant is, even if their training was already happening, maybe their professional staff training had already begun, or if they were a week out or 2 weeks out, or in the case of Western Oregon University, about a month and a half out, all of our schedules were still in draft form, which meant that we all thought, hey, changes may happen, right? We may need to be ready for that. And then finally, most schools were able to send to me clear learning outcomes identified with every session and activity. Some schools, and I think I don't think it was a function of not having that information. Some schools I was only able to receive their schedule. But like I said, most schools that I was able to review sent me 2 documents. So both their schedule and their identified learning and experience outcomes that came with that programming session. So quickly, based off of some of those commonalities, what we can find is that that it's not true that we don't have to facilitate all of the training sessions. And again, in fact, it helps serve and buoy our training programs when we are able to utilize the expertise of guest speakers. You can see quickly that in the commonalities, no, I didn't talk about how every staff goes on retreat. That's not a possibility for every staff. And so I would say it could be something that is nice, right? And can certainly be a wonderful add-on, but not something that would be outlined in the CAS standards as you have to do it. Why do we have to spend so much time on kind of fill in the blank topic? I went ahead and left that in there because I did feel like for most sessions, there was kind of a commonality of we do need to talk about this topic, and we do need to spend and invest some time within that. Doesn't everyone split up their training sessions for first-year staff and returners? Again, that wasn't something that was true for all of the universities and training schedules that I looked at. I did leave the why are we not training our staff like blank university, and that's just because I think that we can always be growing and learning and trying out new opportunities, and so yes, we should be all doing that. Again, is it really necessary to approach our training programs with a curriculum or outcomes in mind? We just want to be fun. Again, what is the best practice as well as the best experience for your students is that, yes, we will be approaching all of our training programs with a curricular focus or with an outcomes-based process. And then do we really have to train our staff each year? Yes, we do, right? And that's one of those things that was a commonality with all of our programs. So what I thought that I would actually just spend a few minutes talking about for each of the common training topics is I wanted to highlight and give some shout outs to the universities that I was able to review that were doing it really well, right? And that we may not be able to focus in on a whole conference session maybe about this one particular thing, but I did want to provide space and kind of pass the microphone, if you will, a proverbial microphone, if you will, to some of those schools that really, again, are going above and beyond, and I think it'd be exciting to kind of hear more from them on these topics. And so this is my shout out section for those doing it well. So the University of Lethbridge actually had a pretty fantastic program specifically around their expectation setting. One of the things that I really appreciated as I was doing my review is that their expectations began on page 1 of the RA manual. And so they wanted to be really clear from the outset of here are our expectations of you, and also had some statements around, and also it's okay for you to have expectations of us as well. They also broke down the training expectations that they had and how that might be different than during the year. And then they also had a section, even again from day 1 of training, that talked about what are those expectations at the end of the year, which I thought, gosh, that is fantastic, right? I mean, why not start talking about that now? The end of the year, as we all know, is a pretty busy time, and so let's put it on the front page, right? Like let's be clear about the expectations. One of the things that I'll also point out as I'm going through these slides is that we also have at the lower right-hand corner a link to the NWACUHO board. And so as I'm talking about some of these opportunities or best practices, and you say, hey, you know what, I really do want to reach out to Steve at the University of Lethbridge, and I want to learn more about these expectations, there's an easy link for you to click on, and so you can get Steve's contact information to follow up on. St. Martin's University, I want to give them a shout out for the work that they're doing around policies and conduct. St. Martin's University is not a large institution, and they have a program or a training session that they do. It's called Pizza and Policies. It's a Family Feud style game, and what it allows for them to do is be able to come together as a large group, have fun, learn about policies, kind of challenge and quiz each other. What I saw that it did is that it really allowed for both fun and learning to happen at the same time. Plus, who doesn't love pizza? I mean, let's be real here, right? And this is going to feel a little self-congratulatory because, yes, I do represent Western Oregon University. But Western Oregon University is doing some really great training around sexual violence and mandatory reporting. So they actually bring in a speaker from Georgia. Her name is, she's from Mississippi, not from Georgia. Her name is Shelly Clark, and she is a nurse, a forensic nurse that is able to talk about how trauma impacts your body and how it impacts your ability to recall events, and how it talks about how you're able to process that event. And so we bring in Shelly. She actually speaks to our resident assistants for about 3 hours. And believe it or not, she is so well received by all of our students that our sexual violence and mandatory reporting is one of the highest rated training sessions that we offer. And that's because of the impact of Shelly and her ability to talk about, again, sexual violence and mandatory reporting. We also have a panel of presenters and experts that come from around the campus that are able to talk about what does it mean to be a mandatory reporter or responsible employee, and sharing information that you hear. We practice during our behind closed doors around how do we talk about being a mandatory reporter, how do we respond to individuals who may be a survivor of sexual violence. And then we also have in-service refreshers, right? So as our staff group gets together throughout the year, we're able to talk about that a little bit more and remind people or remind our student staff about what it means to be a mandatory reporter. The University of Alaska at Fairbanks, they are doing a pretty fantastic job around their programming and community development model. They have it's a new model, and so they're still kind of learning about it. But they have their training on the NWACUHO community development model. And they talk about the KCE philosophy, which is really about knowing, connecting, and empowering. Their community and programming development model is they're interconnected with their campus policies and practices, as well as their cultural and surrounding community practices as well, and what is best practices. And so if you have questions about the programming and community development model, I had lots of questions when I was reviewing this as well. I encourage you to reach out to our colleagues at the University of Alaska Fairbanks to be able to ask more questions about that. The University of Fraser Valley is doing some pretty great work around team development. In fact, if you're able to review their training model, they have both competency outcomes for all of their sessions, as well as they're able to identify what training fits in to help move forward that different topic. And so one of the things that I was really particularly intrigued on is the work that they're doing around team development and really focusing in on that. This is one of those examples where the University of Fraser Valley is able to take their team off-site to do some training for 3 days. And their time while they're off-site is really focused on team development and experiential learning. And so they're going out, they're experiencing things together as a group, and then they're talking about what does that mean for them personally, and then what does that mean for their team. Like I said, I was particularly enamored with this piece of their model. They also, while they're off-site, they have evening assignments related to the team and team development. And so what that means is they need to journal, they need to reflect, they need to really engage in their understanding around what that team means for them. Mount Royal University was doing some pretty exciting things around training for conflict management. They had a series of training topics that really encouraged both self-understanding and, again, going back into that team and into that community setting. They talked about assertiveness and conflict management, They were able to talk about understanding yourself as a leader, understanding culture, and how does culture play a role in the way in which we manage conflict, and what does, again, ultimately, what does that mean for our student experience? They also had, it says international, but I mean intentional time built in for reflection after those conflict management sessions. And again, I think that's an exciting opportunity to help cement some of those learnings that you're able to have in that training session, and really be able to apply both what does this mean for me, and what does this mean for our community, and what does this mean for each other. They also had a 2-hour session devoted to active listening and communication, which, again, I think relates well to conflict management, because where does conflict come from? Usually it's from not listening or hearing each other. So anyway, good job, Mount Royal. Crisis management, again, another shout out to the University of Lethbridge and the work that they're doing. They had a series of training sessions that really talked about crisis management. And again, as I was doing my review, I was able to see how they were putting together all of the different pieces to help our student staff be great managers of crisis, both small and large. So some of their training topics really included a session on risk management, emergency response and active shooters, fire safety training with the city of Lethbridge. And so my guess is that involves maybe the fire department and maybe practicing some skills there. Mental health responsiveness, and so that could be anything that falls into disordered eating. It could be around providing crisis connections after hours. It could be around self-harm, and again, kind of the mental health responsiveness was a large umbrella that I'm putting a lot of things under. They also talked about facilities concerns, right? So what happens when there's that pipe break in the middle of the night or during the middle of the day, as well as more. And so again, I encourage you, if you'd like to know more about what holistically goes into that crisis management topic, our colleagues at the University of Lethbridge would be great people to connect with. Resources, something that we ask our student staff to offer and know about, but how do we get them all together? Our colleagues at Washington State University were just doing a fantastic job organizing this and providing an opportunity for personalized connections with a very large staff team to be able to learn about resources. And so what they do is they organize a resource fair, and they have nearly 40 organizations or teams or departments be able to present and engage with their student staff. And I thought, again, as I was reviewing information, I was like, wow, that is a fantastic way of both being nimble in terms of utilizing the training time that you have, as well as using opportunities for large groups to be able to have that personalized connection. I think what this also allows us to do, or allows Washington State University to do, is give those departments or organizations authorship of, here is the story that I would like for you to reflect back to our students about what it is that we offer and how it is we work. Suicide prevention, again, this feels self-congratulatory, but I think our colleagues at Western Oregon University are doing some really good work in the topic of suicide prevention. All of our professional staff are QPR facilitator trained. And so what that is also known, I think Safe Talk is the topic that or the title that it's known as with our Canadian colleagues. But what that means is that they're able to facilitate those sessions, those training sessions, again, rather than having a guest presenter come in. This also allows them to provide training during the year in case of staff turnover. And then we also have our counseling staff present during our behind closed doors. And so they're able to be there to help them kind of practice asking those hard questions and to be able to be engaged that way. University of Calgary, they are crushing it when it comes to offering online training. They actually offer 17 online training sessions. Their topics include an introduction to housing services, documenting incidents, campus partnerships, harms reduction. They do some fire safety online. They're able to do some inclusion work, as well as, I mean, again, they have 17 topics, so I clearly have not listed them all here. But they're also able to do, when they are able to come together for their in-person training, since all of the online training has already been completed, what that means is that they can really spend their in-person time focusing in on role plays. They can do their hall prep, they can do their team development, they can be really engaged with the in-person time. And so I was, again, as I was making these reviews, I was like, wow, you know, kind of, I was asking myself a lot of questions of, what if, right? What if we could utilize online technology more, or online sessions more, to really maximize that time that we have together? And then I wish I had more information about this, but our colleagues at Washington State University, they are also able to take their team to a 2-day offsite retreat. And the topic of their 2 days offsite is really focused on social justice, diversity and inclusion. And so if you are interested in getting maybe more of a specific breakdown of the diversity and social justice retreat that they have, again, I would encourage you to get in contact with their colleagues at Washington State University, as I am confident that they would be happy to share that information. Again, there were, like, every school was offering something in terms of diversity and social justice. And so if this is not listed as your university, please know that there are many things that we can still learn from each other, even if we feel like we're doing this well. All right, and then I think this is the last slide, but healthy living, and again, gosh, this feels self-congratulatory, but Western Oregon University is doing some exciting work with their peer mentors. Their peer mentors are actually employees of our Student Health and Counseling Center, and we have peer mentors placed in every first-year community. And so I put first-year community in quotes because sometimes we have some upper division students who are living with us and have a peer mentor that is assigned or paired with that program. But by and large, it's really focused in on that first-year experience and promoting healthy living. The peer mentors train alongside the residential education staff. And so the schedule or the amount of training time at Western Oregon University is about 2 weeks. And so we're able to train with the peer mentors for that entire 2 weeks. The training topics that are specifically focused on healthy living include wellness education, bystander intervention, understanding social norms, and self-care. And then throughout the year, we're able to have constant connection to our student health and counseling. And so when something comes up, not only do we have a peer mentor that is in the community, but we have a relationship established with between the peer mentors and the resident assistants, that they're able to kind of talk about how do we help promote healthy living within each of our individual communities. All right, well, so these are a couple of my tips that I was able to collect again as I was doing this review. Is as you are planning your training, a couple of steps. So number one, make sure that you're determining your approach, right? So what kind of training do we want to have and really focus in on? Is it online? Is it in person? Is it a mix, right? Like, how do we want to approach our training? Determine your budget, right? I think that there are lots of opportunities that we would like to provide to our staff, if we have all of the money in the world. Given occupancy projections, given budgetary constraints, my guess is that we don't have all of the money in the world. And so understanding your budget constraints or opportunities is going to be really important from the beginning. Do some good work friend raising, right? Develop partnerships across campus, develop partnerships within your department so that you can maybe help shoulder tap individuals who might be able to be a great guest presenter for you, be able to provide good ideas, right? Friend raising, so different than fundraising, but friend raising is something that will really help your department move forward. And I think in particular, if you're from a smaller institution or a community college where this may be your first time planning training, or I think having those intentional connections across campus only, again, helps move your program forward and as well as make your training stronger. Understand your limitations. Again, each of our campuses are unique and they have opportunities and they have limitations. And so this could be limitations with budget, this could be limitations with space, it could be limitations with scheduling, right? It could be any number of things. And so, again, while I love for everyone to dream big, right, and go like shoot for the moon and all of the sayings that go along with that, I think it's also still really helpful for us to understand our limitations in planning. Infuse your community, right? Make sure that you are inviting in all of those friends that you have raised throughout campus and within your community. If you can, go out into your community. So, involve the fire department in your training if at all possible. Involve the sheriff's department. Involve other departments, that may have other opportunities. Get your president of your university present and involved if you can, right? Help infuse your community. Get out, learn about the resources. Be flexible, right? Gosh, again, we talked about all of our schedules being in draft form. Things are going to change. People are going to cancel plans. That is going to happen, right? You're going to wake up and you're not going to feel great that day, right? So be flexible in your training. Don't be afraid to try something radical, right? Like, we don't move forward if we don't try new ideas. And so, maybe new is uncomfortable, but challenge yourself, right? Challenge your department, because that is how, again, you move forward new and innovative ideas. And then finally, and I should really underline this, but base your training on outcomes and learning. Right? Yes, you can do some things that are fun and that makes sense, but make sure that there's a purpose to that fun. And so, because when the question comes up as to, hey, why are we doing this? You're able to talk about, like, well, here are the 3 reasons. Here are my 3 outcomes as to why I'd like to do that, or why that's in our department best interest, and why we should spend the money on that. All right, so that is actually the end of our presentation portion. My contact information is listed on the screen, as well as I put that link to our WesternOregon Board of Directors. So if there are things that I talked about today that you have follow-on questions, you want to know a little bit more information, all of that information is there, and all that contact information is there. And then, I guess, before we jump into that virtual roundtable, please make sure to kind of grab that address so that we can jump into that, and know that you will need a microphone and then a webcam if possible, because we like to see your faces. And that will be a space that unfortunately won't be able to be recorded, but that will be a space where we can get together and continue to ask those questions, or to have those follow-on conversations. So. All right, well, with that, I'm going to turn it back to Charlene to see if there's anything that is pressing that came up, and then we'll go ahead and move into that virtual roundtable.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Shelly, for that really informative and awesome presentation. I don't see any questions here on the chat, so I think we're good to go there. We'll transition now into the roundtable. The link is right up on the screen and also down in the comments. So please do join us. For those of you that can't make it to the roundtable, thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. Don't forget to fill out our first Friday webinar evaluation, and I hope everyone has an awesome weekend. Thank you.